Hey everybody, Milton Davis here. It is November 17th. It's dark. And I'm here today to talk to you about Changa Safari. As you know, we are gearing up for a Kickstarter to raise the funds to create Changas and the Jade Obelisk Book 2. And since we're in the process of doing that, I thought I would like come online a little bit and talk to you a little bit about Changa Safari, where it came from, some of the influences and some of the inspirations and stuff like that. For those of you who are not familiar with it, there are some of you out here who have read the whole series. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. But for those who haven't, and for those who are curious about it, I just wanted to give you a little background. So, where did Changa Safari begin? Changa Safari was the second novel that I wrote, or the second book that I wrote. It was after I had finished Meji. Meji was a serious epic fantasy, got really deep into the characters. So when I got to Changa, I wanted to do something completely different. I wanted to write something that was more action adventure. But at the same time, I also wanted to write something that included African history. And the real origins of Changa Safari started right here. Let me show it to you. Started right here. This was a book that I picked up in the 90s when I was going through what I call my African Renaissance. And it was a book about the language, the Swahili language. And I called myself at the time going to learn how to speak Swahili, so I could really get into East African culture. And at the time, from what I knew, Swahili was probably the largest spoken language on the African continent, mainly in East Africa. And as I started looking into the language, I started looking into the people who spoke Swahili. And that eventually led me to the Swahili people and the history of East Africa and Swahili merchants. And I thought that, hey, this would be a great background for a book. And me being the history person that I am, I started looking into the research of it. And I started finding out the fascinating history of the Swahili people, their connections with Asia, with India, with China. And I thought this would be a great backdrop for a story. And that's how the whole story got started. That's how the whole thing got started. I wanted to write something that would be similar to your action sword and sorcery type people, but I didn't want to write another Conan. I didn't want a guy lumbering around, going from place to place, and different things like that. The way I describe Changa when people used to first ask me about him, I say he's like Conan with a job, basically. And so I got, and other thing I wanted to do too is not only did I want to show the connections of East Africa with the rest of the world, I also wanted to talk about some of the other African civilizations and empires that existed in the 15th century. The 15th century, in some ways, was like one of the most significant times and periods for the African continent. There were a number of thriving and growing African empires, and I wanted to put Changa in a situation where he would visit each one of these empires and have an adventure in each one of them. So that was the whole I said, an impetus behind doing the story. So the first book, Changa Safari. This is the original Changa Safari. This is with the original cover art that was done by Winston Blakely. We updated the cover art with this one that we did by Wayne Parker later on, but this is the original book. And then, oops, there you go. And the Changa series is they're not novels, basically. There are 3 short stories in each novel, and the short stories are named the way that they would have been named with Swahili names. Like the first one is Kitabu cha Kwanza, which means book 1 in the Swahili language. And the first book is, of course, the Jade Obelisk, which is the book that we're currently adapting into a comic book. So I wanted to put Changa in adventures in all these different places, and I wanted to be as historically accurate as I could in all the places that we went. The first story takes place, of course, in the Swahili coast. Changa is a merchant in Mombasa, and so his adventure starts there. And I actually have him go down to some of the other Swahili cities as well in this book, from Mombasa to Sofala and different places like that, because again I wanted to show that. But I wrapped it all in this great adventure. We also have it's like I said, it's 3 books in this particular one. I'm trying to remember. The first one takes place in East Africa. The second story actually takes place in Indonesia. Indonesia was a significant crossing point for people going from East Africa, from the Arabic nations to Asia. There's a area called the Malaccan Straits, and that was the main area that people would pass through going to Asia. And it's still a major trade route now. One of the places that sits on the Malaccan Straits that you are familiar with is Singapore, the city-state of Singapore. And so Changa has an adventure there. The third book takes Changa to China, where Changa has an adventure there. That one is kind of a fun adventure because I incorporated a piece of Chinese history in that book, to where there was a point where the Chinese emperor was captured by Mongols. This was after China had reclaimed their land from the Mongols. And after 2 years, he returned. And no one really knew, it had details of how he returned. So I decided to make that into a Changa Safari story. The second book, Changa Safari Book 2, is Changa on his way back to East Africa. Now, the travel in between East Africa and Asia is controlled by the monsoons. And the monsoons are basically the winds that blow between these areas. And you have two periods of monsoons. There's a period where the wind is blowing from the east to west, and then there's a period when there's blowing from west to east. And the sailing ships would basically use that as a way to get, to Asia. When the winds were blowing east to west, that's when you sailed to Asia. When they were blowing from west to east, that's when you sailed back to East Africa. So the second book is actually Changa and his crew traveling back to East Africa. The first story takes place in what we now know as India, but at the time was known as Vijayanagar. And then after that story, there's a story that takes place in Yemen. A lot of people don't realize how important Yemen was to that trade during that time period, and the story takes place there. Another reason, because one of Changa's crew members, Amir Zaki, is from Yemen. And then the third story actually takes place in Ethiopia. I wanted to have a story there because of Michele, who is one of Changa's companions in the stories, and it has something to do with his life as well. So that's the first and the second book. The third book is Changa Book 3, which has 3 more stories in it. This book, I had to do a little creative stretching in this one because I wanted Changa to go into the interior of Africa and visit some of the kingdoms in Africa and the empires that existed in Africa during that time. From what I could learn, from what I could research and find out, I really couldn't find any concrete evidence that the Swahili city-states on the coast were trading with any of the interior African kingdoms beyond, say, Great Zimbabwe and some of the other ones that was in the region. So I had to stretch history a little bit. I had to play with the circumstances to get Changa in a situation where he would be traveling into the interior Africa. And this was like, again, another book that also allowed me to talk about different kingdoms. I had a chance to talk about the kingdom of Kanem Bornu. Had a chance to talk about Songhai, which is one of my favorite stories because I got a chance to work Sonia Ali into that story. And then I had a story that takes place in the Yoruba city-states, which is where Panya originates from. So that story is really about her. The entire story has her as a main character. So in between these 3 books and my final book, I took a breather. There were people who were asking questions about the different characters and their origin stories. So I went back and I wrote a collection of stories called Before the Safari, and it's basically stories that they do 2 different things. I actually write the origin story of Changa. I start where Changa is in Western Africa, in the Angola region, in the Congo region, and I show how he ended up beginning his journey to end up in Mombasa. And I talk about each one of the characters with Changa, each one of the main characters, Michele, Panya, Prince Zaki, and I also incorporate stories that kind of shows Changa's journeys as well. And I use all that and I work it back up to the beginning of the series, which is the first story, the Jade Obelisk. As a matter of fact, the last story in this book connects directly with the first story in Changa Book 1, the Jade Obelisk. So after we told all those stories, I decided, okay, hey, it's time to bring Changa home. And that's when I wrote Son of Fumu. Son of Fumu is, unlike the other books, is a complete novel. It is an entire novel about Changa finally returning home to fulfill his promise to reclaim the kingdom that was taken away from his father by the evil sorcerer Ushenge. And this is the only book that touches on any type of European connection during that time, because I'm getting to the end of the 14th century, or the 15th century, when you started seeing some of the exploration of the Portuguese, coming around Africa and going around to the Cape and stuff like that. And there's a part in the story that kind of touches on that. So this is really the first series that I wrote and that I completed, with a series of books. And to be able to work with history, because I'm a big history nerd, and to be able to put fantastic stuff in there, because it's all kind of like sorcerers and monsters and singing trees and all kind of stuff that's going on in Changa as well, that adds the type of thing that makes it Sword and Soul and make it just not a history book. So it's kind of a hidden history lesson, but it's fun. So after I finished the series, I wanted to see it. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see it. And so it came into my mind, I really would like to see Changa, as a comic book series, as animation and stuff like that. And for a long time, I started playing around with how would I make this a comic book series. But I'm like, wait a minute, you know what? I don't need to do this because I know Jason Reeves. And if any of you know Jason, Jason is the owner of 133 Arts. He's an amazing artist, and he also prints and he creates comic books. So we've known each other for a long time. I went to Jason and said, hey man, I would really like to make Changa a comic book. Are you down with that? And Jason was like, yeah, let's do this. And it was interesting because I think Changa grew from that point, because I'm old school. When I'm thinking about Changa, most of my references are the old, some of the old sword and sorcery references and different things like that. Where Jason was just as excited about the project, but he came from a different angle from it, and it shows in the comic book. I was really surprised by the artwork when I finally saw it. Jason said, "Look, I got this. I'll get everything together." He got as soon as we talked about doing it, another one of my great friends, Robert Jeffrey, showed up and said, "Hey, I want to write this." And if you know, Robert is a great comic book script writer. So it saved me to have to actually take the book and translate it into a comic book script. And he also brought in Matteo Illuminati, and he brought in Loris Ravina for the colors. Now, I had never seen Matteo's work before. So when Jason started showing me pictures, I was like, oh man, this is nothing like I expected it to be. I'm thinking, I'll say Frazetta type stuff and different things like that. But when I saw Matteo's work was, to me, more modern, put it that way. I mean, it had that anime element to it, but it also had a energy in it that I hadn't imagined before. And it's like what artists always do. They take what we create as writers, and they take it to another level because they see it with a different eye. And so, we did the Kickstarter. Some of you guys are contributors to Kickstarter. Thank you very much. For those of you who are not familiar with it, this is the first book, Changa and the Jade Obelisk #1. And this one we did a Kickstarter for last year, I believe it was. It was very successful. We were able to, Robert did a great job at translating the first part of the story of the first book in Changa and the Jade Obelisk into a script, and Matteo and Loris just went to town. They did just great work in this book. There's some amazing artwork in this. Let me see one of my favorite pages in this one. Let me find it here. I should have had all this stuff bookmarked, but I didn't. But even the intro, which I really saw as a movie with Prince Zaki running away and trying to get away from people who were chasing him, and then the final scene here where he jumps off the cliff and he's going down into jumping off to what we don't know where he's going to, and then we introduce the story and stuff. And this is the page right here. This is an amazing page right here. This is a page showing Changa and Panya on the deck of at the bow of the Sindibada, and they're on their way to Safala. And so everything about this book just really just blew me away as far as the artwork is concerned. So that takes us up to right now, where we are in the process of getting ready for Changa Book 2. And Changa Book 2, basically, Changa and the Jade Obelisk 2 continues the story from the first book. It goes into a different part of the storyline, and it's where we get a chance to learn a little bit more about Bahati, and learn some more about Prince Aki's story as well. And it's and again, we've got Robert doing the script. We've got Matteo Illuminati doing the artwork. We got Loris Ravina back on the colors, and just what I'm seeing so far. I know some of you have seen the cover, the pages. I mean, it's just great. It's great, and it's going to continue the story. The thing about Changa, and when I look at comic books, is that if we were to do a comic book of every story in other books, we would probably end up doing 200, 300 comic books. I mean, it's just so much there, and even by condensing it and taking away some of the things which may not be as important to the storyline, you still have a lot of stuff to work with. You still have a lot of amazing stories to tell. I think as we move forward into adapting it to a comic book series, we'll probably won't cover all the stories in the book. We'll probably cover the ones that are more significant that we can tell and still give you that journey from East Africa, Asia, back to East Africa, into the interior Africa, and back to Changa's homeland in the Congo region. So that's basically it. That's the background of Changa Safari, what the story is about, what the comic books are going to be about. I'm going to drop a link here in the comments. I see there's a couple of comics here. Hey, Peter, what's up, man? Elizabeth, I'm glad you are excited about it. I'm excited as well. I'm just hoping that you guys are going to help us and come along with us on this journey on the Kickstarter. Now, this Kickstarter is going to be different than most. It's not going to be a whole month. It's going to be 2 weeks. So you basically have 2 weeks to make your pledge and to help us make this happen. So it's not not a situation where you want to sit on your hands. You know, you want to go ahead and jump right into it. We have a pre-launch page set up. I'm going to drop the link here for you guys. Let me see. This is the link to the pre-launch page. What you can do is you can go to this page and you can sign up so you will know when the Kickstarter begins. The Kickstarter is going to drop on Black Friday, November 26th. So when it becomes active, you'll be notified, and you can go ahead and you can make your pledge. We'll have some amazing levels. We've got some real great, perks for each level and stuff like that. So I think you're really gonna be pleasantly surprised when you see them. Now, for those of you who are not familiar and haven't read Changa Safari before, I'm gonna post another link on here, which is basically a link to all the books. You can get them directly from MV Media, and it's a link that shows you the paperbacks, shows you the ebooks. We have it in Mobi, we have it in EPUB, so you can actually get the entire series and read it and check it out, and I think you'll really enjoy it. I'm looking at the comments here, and there's one question about how many issues will the series be. That's a good question, and I don't think it's a question that we can answer right now. I think that, of course, when we do this Kickstarter and when it's successful, we have the second issue out. I think we'll get a better feel for how the energy is and how people feel about the project, and we can really sit down and kind of map out which stories we would tell. And I'm thinking. I mean, I could see 20 books at least. I could see that many. Jason might differ because that's not work, but I could see that happening. I mean, if we want to tell the entire story of Changa from the time we meet him in Mombasa all the way to where he returns to his homeland to confront Ushenge, I could see a lot of books, and I hope that we get a chance to tell that, and I hope you guys are interested in seeing us and listening to us tell that story. So hey, that's what I got. That's Changa Safari. If you have any questions, you know how to get in contact with me. But please take the opportunity to go and take a look at our Kickstarter pre-launch page. Sign up so you can be notified when the Kickstarter begins. If you have read the Changa Safari series, you know what to expect. You know what's going to go down. And I hope you're excited to see everything that you've read illustrated and see it happening in live and get a chance to see it and feel it. If you haven't read the series, then it's going to be a treat. Every story is going to be a new adventure. If you haven't read the series and you want to get a head start on what we're doing, then you can check the series out and read it and hopefully enjoy it. So that's what I got for you guys tonight. Again, go by the Kickstarter page, check it out. Go by my site, check out the books if you haven't read the books before, and we will see you soon. I'll take care. Peace.